Plain and simple. When you're fighting an uphill battle, you just cannot afford to lose a 5-1 lead in the 8th inning in late August. Are the Giants cooked? Probably. And what does that mean we should turn our attention to? We'll discuss it next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, been hosting this show for 5.5 years, and I'm a lifelong Giants fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, so check us out there if you have not already, and please hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you are following the show. SupplyHouse.com is the reliable way to get parts fast. Shop for your next plumbing, HVAC, or electrical job and get fast shipping from coast to coast at SupplyHouse.com. And coming up on today's show, we're going to get into the question, are the Giants cooked? And the answer, probably. Like I said, when you're fighting an uphill battle, you can't have games where like they've had recently, including this 5-1 lead that they blew in the series opener in Seattle. Like they should have won this series. They could have swept the series. Every game was a one-run game. They did win the Blake Snell start, as I suspected they might. But yeah, I mean, they should have won the first game. It was 5-1 in the 8th. There's just no excuse, and there's just no way. I mean, Luis Castillo started for the Mariners. Giants got to him. This guy is a very good pitcher. They got to him. 5 earned runs in 6 innings, 3 homers. Heliot Ramos went deep. Multiple Giants. Let's see. Lamont Wade went deep. Michael Conforto went deep, and Heliot Ramos went deep against Luis Castillo. Hayden Birdsong was good over 4 innings. He did walk 4, but no runs allowed. 1 hit. Sean Jelly allowed a run. Taylor Rogers, nothing. Landon Roop, no runs. And then Tyler Rogers comes in and allows 4 runs on 6 consecutive hits. And I'm sure somebody looked this up, but I'm almost positive that's the first time, probably in his professional career, maybe in his life, that Tyler Rogers has allowed 6 consecutive hits in an outing. And so obviously that was not a good time for that. And did it doom the Giants? Yeah, maybe it did, because, I mean, not because, but just like when you add it all together, there's one game that you should have won 5-1 in the 8th against a team, the Mariners. They had just fired their manager. Their biggest problem this season has been scoring runs. And that team strings together 6 consecutive hits, and if memory serves, they were all singles, right? Like this was just a death by 1,000 cuts, or literally 6. I mean, more appropriately, 6 cuts. Death by 6 cuts to the Giants there in the 8th. Single, 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 single. That's how it went down, and then Ryan Walker came in, strikeout, pop out, strikeout. And so it's like, yeesh, another example of, I mean, it would have been nice to have Camilo Doval available to potentially come in for Rogers, who clearly just, it's not like they were crushing the ball. Those are singles. A lot of them were not hit hard, but nonetheless, I mean, that just sunk the Giants big time. So I'm looking this up. It's the most runs he's allowed in an outing this season, 4. It's the only time he hasn't recorded an out in an outing. And so, yeah, just a bad time for that to happen. And he's never allowed 6 hits in an outing this season. The most previously had been 4 hits. So, yeah, just all in all, a very bad time for that. And where it leaves the Giants after they won the middle game but then lost a frustrating finale is that they are in the wild card standings 5 games back. So still, though, they're the team that is, they're still in the same position in that there's only one team ahead of them between, how am I saying that? The third wild card team right now is the Braves. The Braves are 10 games over 500. The Giants are at 500 at 66 and 66, hence 5 games back. So there's only one team in between the Giants and the Braves, and that's the Mets, who are 2.5 back. And so let me be clear, the Cardinals are also at 500, so they're tied with the Giants. So there's still like the most remote of an outside chance here, but it's going to take the Giants just having a very hot month of, final 30 games. We're talking 30 games remaining. And so it's easy to start doing math here and saying, if you go 30-0, which of course they won't, that would be 96 wins. And that would, arguably win them the division or at least get close to it, but they're not going to go 30-0, of course. But so if you go, 20-10, you're talking only 86 wins if you go 20-10. And that may not be enough to get in. And so even like that's why if you look on Fangraphs, their playoff odds are like 3%, because even if you go 20-10, which is very unlikely, something like that, you're still possibly not going to make it. And that's the position that they're in. And I look back and I look at this game against Seattle, 5-1 lead in the 8th with Tyler Rogers. Again, an unforced error with optioning Camilo Doval. I never liked that. I never understood that. I still don't agree with it, that they did it at all. And I think it hurt them a couple times. Hurt them against the White Sox. So that's the other game I want to complain about, when it was 2-2 in the 9th, and they leaned on Eric Miller and Spencer Bivens in a tie game in the 9th, in a kind of, I don't want to call it a must win because it wasn't, but it was a very important game. And, one of your 8 best relievers, which is what I said when they sent him down, or before, when people were saying they should send him down to send a message. I said he's clearly one of their 8 best relievers. My point was, in a situation just like that against the White Sox, would you rather have Spencer Bivens out there, or would you rather have Camilo Doval? And to me, I'm going to go with the guy who's been there and done that. And they didn't have him. He wasn't available because they optioned him, which they didn't have to do. And so there was the Mariners game, there was that White Sox game, and then there's the fact that they lost 3 out of 4 at home to the Braves, which is kind of like a nail in the coffin when you look back on it. 2 straight 1-run extra inning losses, 1-0 and 4-3. And so that loses them the tiebreaker. If they would have just won one of those 2 games and split the series, they would have won the tiebreaker with Atlanta. Now they have to pass Atlanta if they were to, if it came down to it. So that's 3 games just in the last week and a half, or almost 2 weeks, that I would say they should have won 3 times and they lost. And so if they had won 3 times, they would instead be 69 and 63, which is obviously, wait, is that right? Yeah, they would be 6 games over that. What am I talking about? Yeah, because you add 3 wins and you take away 3 losses, 69 and 63. Unless I'm just like horribly mistaken, that's what it would be. And that would put them, 2 games back. Yeah, that makes sense. So they would gain 3 games in the standings there. So they'd be 2 back, and you'd be in the mix, like very much in the mix there. But instead, they're not. They're 5 back, but they have to pass Atlanta if Atlanta is indeed that third wildcard team. So they're really kind of effectively 6 back with 30 to play. So odds are slim. And at this point, does that mean that the focus should shift elsewhere? Is it time to start thinking about the youth? I think it is. And there's some, there's been a lot, that's been the silver lining this season, has been the breakout of youth, Heliot Ramos, Tyler Fitzgerald, and then even Grant McCray showing what he can do. So we'll get into the youth movement for the Giants and if it's time to focus on that in just a minute and before we do. Today's episode of Locked on Giants is brought to you in part by Supply House. Get supplies from the site that's made for the skilled trades. SupplyHouse.com. SupplyHouse.com is the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands and get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining SupplyHouse.com's free Trademaster program. Every Trademaster gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at SupplyHouse.com/TM and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at SupplyHouse.com. All right, here we go. We are going to get into, where does the focus turn now for the Giants if, in fact, they're cooked, which technically, of course, they're not eliminated. 5 games back with 30 to play. You're eliminated when they would be eliminated if they were 5 games back with 5 to play if they were 5 back of the Braves, because a tie would do them no good because they lost at 3 out of 4. But, obviously you let the season play out and oh, by the way, Robbie Ray got injured in his start, so he could go on the injured list. And thanks again for making Locked on Giants your first listen today. Everydayers tomorrow, I think we'll be doing, I tried to do a fresh batch of mailbag questions last week. And when I say I tried, I intended to, and then I forgot to put out the prompt. And so we just dipped into some old ones. But now things have changed in a major way since the last time I actually put out a prompt. So I'd kind of like to get a temperature test for what's going on with fans right now and do a mailbag for you tomorrow. So look out on Twitter or X tonight for the prompt, and we'll get to your questions tomorrow. For your second listen today, enjoy the Locked On MLB podcast. Host Paul Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully, is here daily to provide national expertise with his trademark humor to help you get ready for the MLB playoffs here in the dog days of summer. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day on Locked On MLB, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And a reminder that you can catch every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM. Just download the SXM app and search the word Giants. So, let's just say there's definitely people out there who are 3% playoff odds? What are you talking about? The season is over. They're not going to the playoffs. And you're very likely correct. Very likely correct. And then it's what is this season about now? And also, I'm sure there are people wondering, and this will be probably one of the most asked questions if I had to anticipate. And I've done a lot of mailbags, so I'm pretty good at anticipating what the questions will be like. There's going to be a lot of questions about Farhan Zaidi and his failure, assuming they don't make the playoffs again this year, to turn this team into a perennial contender. They're more like a perennial middle-of-the-pack team. And so there's going to be questions about his future, and those are legitimate at this point. If this season ends in another non-playoff appearance, then it's definitely legitimate to talk 2019, 2020, 2021, 107 wins, 2022, 2023, 2024. 6 seasons, 1 playoff appearance with just a freak 107 win season out of nowhere in year 3. But other than that, no playoffs. And not even a good record and missing the play. Just what are we doing here? But it is also fair to point out that this season has been different than than the others in that there's been a breakout of youth on the Giants that has been noteworthy, especially on the position player side, which it's been forever since we've been able to say they've had any kind of breakout of any kind of young position players. I mean, Patrick Bailey did it last year, largely defense, and that kind of, it doesn't put people in the seats to say, here's a really good pitch framer. I'm nothing against Bailey. I'm a huge fan of Bailey, who's like, arguably the best defender in the sport because of what he is able to do from a pitch framing perspective, and how much value that adds. Like, he's been super below average offensively, even though he started off well. He completely fell off a cliff, and put up almost 4 Fangraphs wins above replacement in just 96 games because of his defense, and that's really good. But specifically, I'm talking about Heliot Ramos, Tyler Fitzgerald, and now possibly Grant McCray. I think those 3 warrant serious attention here as we kind of potentially look ahead towards 2025. No matter who's running the ship, whether it's Farhan Zaidi or somebody else, and whether it's Bob Melvin or some other manager, I think it's relevant, very relevant, to talk about these players establishing themselves as not just, decent complementary players, but I don't want to quite call them impact players at this point because it's still a smallish sample, but they've certainly had breakout seasons. And, Heliot Ramos, it's been a bigger sample now for him. We're talking 399 plate appearances on the season. That's a lot. It's not 50, it's not 100, it's not 150. We're talking 400 plate appearances. He's got 20 home runs. Like, he started pulling the ball more for power. His isolated power is 220. That is well above the major league average. He's hitting 284 with a 341 on base and a 504 slugging. The defense has not been good in center, but it has been good in the corners. And Grant McCray's emergence has, was a good move in that it pushed Ramos to a corner. They needed to get him out of center field, and I don't think Ramos is going to be in center field anymore, unless it's some kind of an emergency situation. I think Ramos profiles really well in left or right. I guess right is tough at Oracle Park, but if you think about next season, and by the way, just for the record, this season in just under 500 innings, negative 13 defensive runs saved for Heliot Ramos in center, and negative 7 outs above average. Whereas in the corners, he's at plus 8 defensive runs saved in 270 innings and plus 2 outs above average in the corners. So a good defender in the corners per these metrics, very, very bad in center per these metrics again. And then you put a McCray out there, and then you also have to remember Jung-Hoo Lee is on this team moving forward. And so that is something to keep in mind is okay, what does their roster look like next season in the outfield? It's possible Heliot Ramos, if they think left is the best spot for him, it is going to be interesting to see what do they do with Jung-Hoo Lee if Grant McCray is indeed a part of the future of this team, because then it could possibly push Jung-Hoo Lee to a corner. And is Jung-Hoo Lee better suited for right or left? It may be right, given he's got a really strong arm and he's fast. And so that does profile well in right field. And then what does that mean for Mike Yastrzemski? What does that mean for the Giants' potential pursuit of a player like Juan Soto? It starts to, beg all these questions that are off-season type questions. But the season for Ramos certainly warrants, he has earned a spot, a starting role on the 2025 team, Heliot Ramos and Tyler Fitzgerald. We're not there yet with McCray, but those two, at least incumbent status, as we've heard Farhan Zaidi use that term before, for sure with Ramos, and for Fitzgerald, I mean, we're talking about shortstop. That's an important position, and he's done a really, really nice job there for the Giants, playing roughly average defense according to the metrics at shortstop, and then hitting 298, 353 on base, 567 slugging, 14 homers, 16 steals in 19 attempts in just 69 games, and 3.2 Fangraphs wins above replacement in just 69 games. That's like less than half a season. If you double that, we're talking 6+. You can't just assume he's going to keep that up, but that is a pace of like a 6+ wins above replacement season, which puts you, gets you MVP votes. So he should get Rookie of the Year votes, Tyler Fitzgerald, and probably Heliot. Well, I don't think Heliot Ramos is actually qualified as a rookie. I'm not even sure. I think he is. But anyway, yeah. So what I'm saying is, you may finally have a left fielder if they decide, like whether it's Jung-Hoo Lee or Heliot Ramos, you may finally see the streak end of different left fielders. Not next year, but the year after that, because I think Heliot Ramos or Jung-Hoo Lee both are under contract for multiple seasons beyond this year, and they'll decide one of them's better for left, and that player could just be an everyday guy in left field for the foreseeable future. And so they may have finally done it and found their corner outfield. They may have like a stable outfield for years to come. So that is a big deal. And then also shortstop, finally, transitioning from Brandon Crawford is a big deal as well. And Tyler Fitzgerald has really, really done a nice job. I mean, defensively and offensively. So it's significant to have these breakout seasons. We didn't even yet talk about Grant McCray, but I do want to get into more about McCray, who had a nice series in Seattle and just showed off his arm, showed off some easy power. So we'll talk about Grant McCray and the future for the Giants more in just a minute. And before we do, today's episode of Locked On Giants is brought to you in part by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit fanduel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. And of course, also at fanduel.com, you can check out, what's going on with in the world of sports betting. And for baseball, it's just one of those games where there's so many games that there's always something to look at. And for me, I'm looking ahead to the Giants in Milwaukee. I'm actually not seeing that because they're off today, but the Giants are probably going to be underdogs in Milwaukee. Pitching matchup, I think Logan Webb going in that game 1 against Myers, who's having Tobias Myers with a 2.87 ERA because, of course, Brewers just doing Brewers things, getting really good production out of a guy who I had never heard of. And there he is with his 2.87 ERA in 103 innings. So probably take the under on the over-under, even though I haven't seen what the over-under is. It could be a tight game. So anyway, check out fanduel.com /lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. All right, here we go. We're going to look at Grant McCray and the future of the Giants 2025, looking ahead, because this season, I'm not saying it's over, but I'm also not saying it's over. Thank you again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Every day is tomorrow. Like I said, I want to get a feel for what you guys are thinking and answer your questions, tough questions. I don't know what they're going to do when it comes to people getting fired and this and that and the other. And I don't obviously make those decisions. So don't get mad at me for whatever they do or don't do. Or I just have opinions about what I think is going to happen and not happen. And so I'll be happy to give you those tomorrow if you ask a question. So anyway, also a reminder that if you want instant reaction, if you're furious about Bob Melvin's bullpen management, check out Locked On Sports San Francisco on YouTube and hit the bell notification. Subscribe and hit the bell notification because Eric Engel does something called Postcast right after the games. And he'll also be doing it. He's already doing it for 49ers preseason games, but all season long for the 49ers, there's going to be postcasts after every game on that same channel, Locked On Sports San Francisco, and Warriors games. So check that out. And then the Giants postcasts go on the Locked On Giants podcast feed everywhere but YouTube because it has its own YouTube channel. But like Apple, Spotify, etc., you can find those instant reaction podcasts on our feed. And you can also join that conversation and get in on, hear that instant reaction. Anyway, with that said, let's talk about Grant McCray a little bit because he, along with multiple young players like Tyler Fitzgerald, Heliot Ramos, some guys on the pitching side. I mean, the season that Ryan Walker has had has been phenomenal. And, it does, like I said, you start to question. There are certain things that I start to question, like Michael Conforto. If you fall too far out of this race, do you just, cut loose on Michael Conforto, who's a free agent at the end of the season, possibly before the end of the month, so that a playoff team could snatch him up and he would be eligible to be on their postseason roster, because there's a benefit to that if you're the Giants in that it opens up a spot for you on the 40-man and on the Major League roster to play young guys. Like, do you want to give Luis Matos one more month to see if he can kind of break through a little bit, or somebody else? Like, I think they don't do it. I think that they are motivated enough to try to stay in this race. Like, I get it, 3%, whatever, playoff odds, but at the same time, they really don't want to miss the playoffs. And so, giving away a Michael Conforto for nothing, I'm not sure they're going to do that. But you could see something like that, I guess. Maybe if you get swept in Milwaukee and fall to like 8 games back or something, if the Braves sweep whatever series they're playing. I think they're playing a good team. I don't remember who, but anyway, stuff like that you could look out for as a possibility. And then in the off season, looking at, like I said, if your outfield consists of Heliot Ramos, Jung-Hoo Lee, and who am I missing? Heliot Ramos, Jung-Hoo Lee, and Grant McCray, duh. Where does that leave Mike Yastrzemski? Well, it leaves him as a possible non-tender candidate. And I think some people doing cartwheels hearing me say that. But he just turned 34. It's kind of shocking that Yastrzemski is now 34, and he's making almost $8 million this year. And next year is eligible for arbitration for the final time. So, his salary for 2025 figures to be roughly, like, if they were to tender him a contract, you get a raise in arbitration. Like, it's kind of complicated to explain, but basically he would end up like making roughly $10 million. And would you rather just go McCray, Jung-Hoo Lee, and Heliot Ramos and not, commit $10 million to Mike Yastrzemski and instead kind of allocate that money elsewhere? I think that's increasingly a possibility, especially given he's going to turn 35 next season. It's just almost hard to believe. When he first showed up with the Giants, he was 28, which is old for a rookie, but still, now he's been here a while. So anyway, let's get into Grant McCray because he factors into that heavily. And so obviously it's been a small sample. We're talking 38 plate appearances only, and he has struck out rounding 40% of the time, 39.5% of the time. So that is way too high of a strikeout rate. But when he has not struck out, he's impacted the ball. 250 isolated power is great. 19% barrel percentage, which is percentage of batted balls that are classified as barrels. So it's like when he's putting the ball in play, 1/5 of the time they've been a barrel, which is, it doesn't mean like old school traditional, like hitting it on the barrel. It doesn't just mean like hitting it on the good part of the bat. A barrel per this official metric is like hitting it hard essentially and in the air at like a good launch angle. The harder you hit it, the less air you need under it to classify it as a barrel. It's a little bit of a complicated metric, but basically barrels are very, very good. They result in exceptionally kind of damaging type of contact, and to have a 19% barrel rate is very good. To strike out 40% of the time, not very good. But also in center field, I mean, he's put up 0.4 Fangraphs wins above replacement in 10 games. And so I've been impressed with, his running ability. He showed off his arm really for the first time in this series in Seattle. I hadn't seen him make like a competitive throw yet, like a throw where he was really trying to throw somebody out. And I was blown away. I mean, his arm was very strong. The Fangraphs report doesn't actually mention his arm, but I don't know. I mean, he looks like this is a guy who stole 52 bases in the minors in 2023, just last year. 52 bases in 62 attempts. So he did get thrown out 10 times, but nevertheless, the power, he's got power, he's got speed, and he's got athleticism. He's 23 years old, turns 24 in December. But, definitely a guy I want to see continue to play for the last month of the season, and could very well factor into the 2025 roster as early as opening day. And that could very well mean something for Mike Yastrzemski, given that Jung-Hoo Lee is coming back and that Heliot Ramos has earned that spot. And so it's just time to kind of start thinking about those things. And then you also prepare yourself for another failed free agent pursuit of Juan Soto. Of course, get ready to hear rumors and then have your heart broken, or be so jaded that your heart won't be broken because you believe and know that he won't sign here, and then he won't, and then you will be like, I knew it. So, all of that ad infinitum, it just goes on, doesn't it? That's just Giants baseball torture, not in the good way right now. Anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen today. Now go check out the Locked On MLB podcast. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day. You can find the link to Locked On MLB in the description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Reminder, you can catch, I should say, every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM. Just download the SXM app and search the word Giants. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on X at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out a lot, so thank you in advance, and thanks to everyone who's done so already. Can't wait to be with you again tomorrow for that mailbag episode. Look out on Twitter for the prompt, or X, I should say. Thanks again for listening today. You are now Locked On Giants.